Good day, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the last webinar of this year, organized by the CBD Women's Caucus, and it is a pleasure to moderate it. Also, I am Amelia Reguin, coordinator of the Caucus, and well, the idea of this session is to share with you all the different accomplishments and the different challenges we faced during the year. But before actually jumping into the discussion and the sharing, to let everyone know that we have a interpretation into English, Spanish, and French. So please, for whoever need it, you can make use of these services. And well, let me share with you all the objectives of this session. First of all, is to provide an overview, a general panorama of the discussions and outcomes of the 3 intersessionals and negotiations that happened during this year under the Convention on Biodiversity. First one is SUBSTA, the subsidiary body on technical and technological advice. The working group on Article 8J on indigenous issues and related provisions, as well as the working group on digital sequence information. This overview of the discussions are going to be uniquely interpreted through the lens of the CBD Women's Caucus members, who are going to share with all of us the advocacy priorities of the group, but also they will analyze the outcomes of each meeting, and we will then be able to identify the progress achieved or not towards gender equity in various of the CBD discussions. Also, just as a reminder that this is the 6th webinar of a series organized by the Women's Caucus called Gender is a Biodiversity Issue. And if you are interested in watching the recording of the previous sessions, you can do so. And because all of them were recorded, and we can share it afterwards by email with all of you. And now let us move on into the conversation. But first of all, hearing some opening remarks from our distinguished guest. Today we have with us Ms. Laura Bermudez, representative of the Colombian government, whose commitment to shaping biodiversity locally and internationally is truly commendable, and who has actually played a critical role for the CBD Women's Caucus to be able to influence the discussions at the international level. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Laura Bermudez, and let us hear from her opening remarks. Thank you so much, and welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Amelia. Good day for everyone. I just want to check if I can I speak in Spanish, or I don't know if we have the interpretation. ¿Sí?
Sí,
okay.
sí se puede.
Ok, gracias. Gracias, muchas gracias, Amelia, por la invitación. ¿Ahí me escuchan bien?
Se escucha, se escucha.
Gracias. Muchas gracias por la invitación y un saludo para todas en diferentes partes y diferentes momentos del día. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Para mí es un placer poder acompañarlas en esta sesión de revisión un poco de los avances y de los logros durante este año. Mi nombre es Laura Bermúdez, como ya dijo Amelia. Trabajo en el Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible de Colombia, y acompaño las negociaciones del Convenio de Biodiversidad y otros instrumentos internacionales. Y en particular en este proceso pues, del marco post-2020 he estado apoyando las negociaciones desde el inicio, desde que empezamos en la COP14 y durante todo el proceso de la pandemia hasta el año pasado en la COP15, donde llegamos a un acuerdo sobre el marco global. Y en este último año, después del acuerdo que tuvimos en la COP15, he estado apoyando también a nivel nacional el proceso de implementación y de interpretación de lo que es el marco global a las realidades nacionales. Y yo creo que en este periodo y con esta perspectiva, las discusiones sobre género y sobre la participación de la mujer y de las niñas en todo este proceso ha cobrado gran relevancia. Y quisiera hacer referencia a eso porque pues creo que además también el trabajo que ustedes han hecho desde el Caucus de Mujeres es muy valioso en el sentido de poder poner en la primera línea la importancia de un enfoque de género y de una participación activa en los diferentes espacios de toma de decisión de las mujeres. Creo que en ese sentido, los avances que hemos hecho conjuntamente, creo que desde las organizaciones, pero también desde los gobiernos que apoyamos estos procesos, pues es realmente fundamental y muy importante. Creemos que a nivel nacional, en el caso de Colombia, hemos venido trabajando en una política con enfoque de género y teniendo en consideración y poniendo en primera línea a las mujeres. En un país como el nuestro, donde hay unas desigualdades importantes y hay unos procesos, además, desde los movimientos sociales de reivindicación del papel de la mujer, y en particular en el gobierno actual en el que estamos, eso ha logrado llegar a un nivel institucional importante y desde el gobierno, desde las instituciones públicas, nacionales y regionales, se ha logrado incorporar en los instrumentos de planeación y en los instrumentos de ejecución esta visión de género y la importancia y la participación de la mujer, no solamente con las reglas de paridad, por ejemplo, en los cargos públicos, sino también en la participación real, en la decisión sobre las políticas públicas y en la formulación de las políticas públicas, pero también en la implementación. Y en ese sentido, creemos que la meta 22 y 23 y todo el plan de acción de género nos marcan un camino importante en este proceso, desde lo internacional, teniendo en consideración pues que fue un proceso bien interesante la negociación tanto de la meta 22, pero especialmente de la 23 y del plan de acción de género que nos puso a hablar a todos y acordar entre todos qué es lo prioritario en estos temas desde lo internacional y ahora un poco cómo lo traemos a nivel nacional y lo hacemos real. Allí hay muchos logros, como he mencionado, pero también hay retos importantes. Lograr incorporar este lenguaje en todos los instrumentos internacionales y en los instrumentos nacionales y sobre todo en la implementación, pues sigue siendo una tarea que tenemos que seguir avanzando. Esa perspectiva de género incluye una visión tal vez más compleja de lo que tenemos que hacer, pero al mismo tiempo una visión muy enriquecedora de tener en consideración esas visiones que durante mucho tiempo han sido eh, silenciadas o opacadas. Y creo que este es otro logro, pero también otro reto, sigue siendo un reto y es la visibilización. Y creo que en eso ustedes han trabajado bastante. Y cómo visibilizar las realidades con una visión de género y las realidades desde las mujeres, las niñas y las jóvenes. Visibilizar los grandes retos que tienen en su diario vivir, no solamente en relación con su territorio y con los otros, sino también, por supuesto, con la conservación y el uso sostenible de la biodiversidad y lo que significa eso para las metas globales que estamos trabajando en el marco del convenio de biodiversidad. Entonces, creo que esa visibilización de los procesos es fundamental para avanzar en lo que nos hemos propuesto tanto en el plan de acción de género como en las metas del marco. Y por supuesto, trasladar todo ese discurso a acciones concretas y creo que allí el otro reto importante es lograr generar unos indicadores que nos permitan medir no solamente las metas, estas metas del marco, sino también indicadores que nos permitan ir midiendo el logro de las actividades que tenemos en el plan de acción de género. Esos indicadores, y tuvimos varias discusiones en el SOPSTA, ahora en la reunión del grupo de trabajo del 8J, e incluso el grupo de trabajo sobre secuencias digitales, donde va a ser muy importante poder incluir estos elementos relacionados con género y la visión desde el mundo femenino, desde el mundo de las mujeres, para que realmente nos dé cuenta de los avances o no que podamos tener en estas metas y en este plan de acción. Entonces, la construcción conjunta de los indicadores, la la incorporación de trabajos que ya se han avanzado y lo vimos en la reunión que tuvimos en Ginebra hace una semana. Hay varias, desde varias instancias se ha venido trabajando en indicadores desde varias organizaciones, entonces es importante eh, conocer esa información, divulgar esa información y eventualmente incorporarla en la discusión del grupo de indicadores, en el grupo oficial que, pues, que existe, en el grupo de expertos de indicadores, porque sabemos que ellos no, seguramente no van a entrar al nivel de detalle de muchos de estos elementos que además son nuevos, son novedosos y por lo tanto implican un trabajo muy grande. Entonces, en la medida en que nosotros podamos apoyar el trabajo de ese grupo de indicadores, trayendo experiencias, trayendo tareas que ya se han realizado e información que se pueda aportar para la construcción de esos indicadores para reflejar el avance en las metas 22-23 y en el plan de acción de género es fundamental. Yo creo que esos son retos y tareas importantes que pues hay que seguir trabajando, que las animo además a que hagamos, finalmente el otro mensaje es un trabajo conjunto entre las organizaciones y los gobiernos. Creo que eso ha demostrado que puede traer muy buen resultado. Desde el proceso, por ejemplo, que ustedes llevan, tienen acceso a una cantidad de información que a veces desde los gobiernos no es fácil acceder, tienen acceso por supuesto, a diferentes movimientos sociales, a grupos de mujeres o grupos de interés que pueden aportarnos en esta discusión como gobiernos, que pueden aportarnos elementos y en el caso del gobierno de Colombia está totalmente abierto a recibir de parte de los grupos de mujeres, otros grupos de interés de jóvenes y en general de los movimientos sociales, todos los insumos que se requieran para las negociaciones internacionales y por supuesto para la implementación a nivel nacional, que es el gran reto. Entonces, allí elementos como poder tener ese enfoque de género en las inversiones que se hacen a nivel territorial, tener en consideración además, y lo discutimos también mucho, los defensores de derechos que han sido afectados por estar ejerciendo y defendiendo los derechos ambientales y en particular las mujeres que están en ese rol y en ese papel. Creo que es muy importante abrazarlas, tenerlas en consideración y transmitir esos elementos para que hagan parte de la política pública internacional y nacional. Entonces creo que ese trabajo conjunto entre organizaciones como las de ustedes y el gobierno, los gobiernos como el gobierno de Colombia, son fundamental. Nosotros tenemos pues toda la disposición de seguir trabajando conjuntamente para incidir en los instrumentos internacionales y también en los instrumentos nacionales que nos permitan garantizar la implementación urgente, además, de todas estas metas y estos propósitos. Yo creo que ya dejo allí, podría seguir conversando con ustedes mucho más. Quiero agradecer a todas las mujeres con las que estuvimos compartiendo en Ginebra. Creo que Amelia y tu equipo fue fantástico poder tener ese trabajo conjunto y pues ahí vimos unos resultados que seguramente tendremos que seguir trabajando sobre ellos en las próximas reuniones del SOPSTA y SBI y obviamente de cara a la COP, donde grandes discusiones nos quedaron pendientes y van a ser objeto de trabajo en adelante. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much, Laura, for always being so supportive and a truly gender champion for all the women and girls, and for being here with us today. And I think that you provided a remarkable tune for this conversation regarding the outcomes, the challenges, the gains. So now let us jump into the panel and hear from these colleagues that they will, as you mentioned, to showcase from the collaboration and diplomacy based on the trust and the relationship what we were able to gain. And now, just as a quick reminder for my dear panelists, your interventions shall be in not longer than 6 minutes. So we are able to listen to all of you and also ensure at the end of the session a fair space for question and answers with the participants. So for the beginning, let us actually, now that Laura mentioned the topic about monitoring and the need of having a robust monitoring framework and a process that will actually make visible the contributions. Let us hear from Valentina Figuera from the Global Forest Coalition, a member of the Women's Caucus, her views and regarding this particular item that was discussed during Substa 25. Welcome, Valentina, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Amelia. Gracias, Laura, también por iniciar la conversación de una manera tan dialogativa. Estamos muy en línea con esa introducción. Well, I would like to start by highlighting all the collective effort that we did. We had a task force on the monitoring framework, and I would like to thank all the effort and also the inputs given to collect the different perspectives and view. This is something that shows the integration of a feminist perspective and effort in order to, contribute to this process. The members who actually actively participated were, provided important inputs and expertise. Many of them actually joined online at different time zones while we were in Nairobi. So this is something that I really would like to, highlight today and say that your contributions were fundamental to build the priorities of the caucus. So it is not only me today presenting, I'm just a facilitator, but the outcomes or discussions that I'm going to share here are part of a collective effort by many of us. So the main discussion regarding this item on the monitoring framework was actually advocating very strongly to have a rights-based and a gender-responsive implementation. That was a big priority in the discussions of the task force. The need to cover not only quantitative, but also not only quantitative, but also qualitative elements of the targets and goals. And specifically integrating, the status of biodiversity. That was, of course, very important and crucial, but also the alignment or the integration with human rights, including, of course, or having a special emphasis on women, youth, and indigenous peoples and local communities. So I would say that the first priority of this agenda item on the monitoring framework would be the having a gender inclusive monitoring and reporting. That was precisely the core advocacy effort that we advocated for. The monitoring framework must include gender-specific indicators, and this is something that we have repetitively said and exchanged with different parties and organizations, and also gender disaggregated data. And of course, in line with the gender plan of action, so that we can actually address the gender gaps within the monitoring framework. So we need to keep highlighting the need that we need to have headline indicator for target 23 and 22 to actually, monitor in a robust manner the progress of the KM-GBF. Another aspect or priority as part of the, collective views was the, as I said before, precisely, highlighting the rights-based and gender-responsive approach. We advocated for comprehensive reporting based not only on biodiversity data, but also including considerations to actually integrate and include human rights and gender equality consideration into the national biodiversity strategies plans in line with what our colleague Laura just shared from Colombia. Also, another priority was allocating adequate human and financial resources. Okay, we know that we got important wins with the Gender Plan of Actions, with Target 23 and 22, but what about next? What are the next steps to actually implement progressively and equitative the targets, the standalone targets and the Gender Plan of Actions? Well, we need, financial resources, we need human resources, and have a gender responsive implementation, including by tracking reporting resource allocations with gender initiatives and applying gender responsive budgeting. And actually, one of the achievements that I would like to highlight is the inclusion of a text in the proposed indicator text for Target 23 regarding the number of countries with legal, administrative, or policy frameworks, including the Gender Plan of Actions, as well as allocation of specific financial resources to ensure that all women in all the diversities and girls have equal opportunities and also capacity to contribute to the three objectives. That was something that we proposed. Amelia was there, also highlight the fact that she stayed until, very late night in the negotiations to actually guarantee that this inclusion in the text could be there. So it's a big win. Every one of us is actually, doing and contributing with a little piece of effort so that we can, continue pushing and ensuring gender inclusion. Very quickly, regarding the challenges, I think that it's quite challenging to develop a comprehensive methodology for headline indicators. It takes time and also expertise. We are here, but we know that the national implementation of the Gender Plan of Action should be prioritized over a binary indicator, for example, and we would need to continue advocating for this. Also, capacity building and political willingness is a bit of a challenge too. We've had a side event. One of the side events that we had at SOPSTA was actually, we had a party who was, very interested in the, gender responsive implementation. And I remember that she said something like, yes, I'm really interested, but, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to proceed. How can we build synergies so that parties know that we are, available to, build these bridges in terms of having a gender responsive implementation? But that could be quite a challenge because we have, some mandates regarding gender responsive implementation, but we may not have the, adequate gender focal points in, all the ministries and in institutions so that we can actually have it in a equitable and extensive manner. Some other challenges a bit to be discussed and negotiated are some bracketed texts in Target 23 and 22, specifically regarding to the number of countries promoting the full, equitable, and inclusive and gender responsive representation and participation. That is something that is still in brackets. So it's going to be quite a challenge to actually, continue advocating for including specific language related to the incorporation of women and girls and their contributions in national reports and biodiversity plans. And finally, to wrap up, I think that we still have opportunities. The work hasn't ended. Actually, we were considering with Amelia that the task force can, continue working and increasing collective efforts so that we can continue, doing progress on this. I think that one of the opportunities I would highlight is the fact that we advocated for the inclusion of a paragraph to request the ATEC to continue its mandated work. And there will be a challenge, to provide technical advice to fill critical gaps. Sometimes I feel that the ATEC has a lot of things to do, and it's quite complicated to sync these synergies. But I do believe that it is possible if we continue working with our collective efforts. And finally, I think that it is a big opportunity that we can continue contributing. That the discussion hasn't ended, the text hasn't been, the negotiations haven't finalized. So we still have some room to continue contributing in online discussion forums established in decision 15-5, I think, so that we can, as local communities and women organizations and other relevant groups can continue giving inputs, providing increasing the discussions to respond to questions raised by the ATEC or other, instances within the convention. So I'll leave it here. Thank you all for your effort. Thank you, Amelia, for, trusting in our, leadership also. And let's keep it working, and let's keep, doing this effort together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentina. And definitely this is a collective effort where all of us have played a critical role. And as you say, let's keep this collective and collaborative with other actors, like collaboration among us as Women's Caucus, but definitely with others, other actors that are relevant to the process. And definitely, and also I agree very much with your point on that the negotiations are not over. The work is not done yet, so we can still bring in our points into the different spaces. And I think it's the same for the next item that we're going to hear about from our colleague Joyce Peshu, speaking all the way from Kenya to all of us. And because she's going to, she managed to lead the task force on the sustainable wildlife management item, and now she's going to provide some of their reflections and next steps potentially on how to keep mainstreaming gender into this item. Thank you so much, Valentina, for that. And now welcome you, Joyce. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, so we were able to submit recommendations, and initially we did also have a task force to look at the item and just come up with some of the recommendations. Just to start us off, like for the sustainable wildlife management, we were looking at how wildlife species are able to sustain in a certain habitat, but ensure that social economic needs of human population are considered. So looking at aspects of human wildlife conflicts, looking at unsustainable illegal trade, tenure rights, poverty, food and livelihood security, and mostly addressing these issues and looking at the needs, priorities, knowledge and understanding of both men and women and how ensuring both are actively included in decision-making around sustainable wildlife management, because we believe if that happens, then we are able to reconcile benefits of both sustainable wildlife management and gender equality. So just to move on into what some of the advocacy areas that we were looking at. So one is that around inclusive livelihoods, to ensure that we advocated that everyone benefits from sustainable wildlife management, especially including women as constituents in this space, recognizing and acknowledging that women among other constituents are custodians of biodiversity. And I can say that in terms of that recognition in the text, I think that was one thing that we were able to achieve, because in texts that didn't include, women or recognition of women as constituents, then we were able to include that. And then the other advocacy point was the implication of the assessment to the convention, especially to the on the need of transformative changes to ensure that involvement of the society should be able to be guided by human-based approach, and also human rights-based approach, and also include gender considerations. Also emphasizing the inclusion of both men and women in wildlife-related livelihood opportunities, and how everyone should be able to benefit equitably. So I was saying, in terms of advocacy, the recognition of women as constituents were there, but I felt like in terms of the data, especially, we had advocated for sex aggregated data or gender disaggregated data as a pivotal step towards integrating gender considerations in wildlife management. So we still need to do a lot to be able to push on that. And just to move on to the opportunities, is that through the collaborative partnership on sustainable management, in their work plan, they were able to indicate that they will apply multidisciplinary approaches that integrate gender issues in designing and implementing activities to sustainable use and management. And I think that's a really good opportunity for us. And the other opportunity was the request to submit views on best practices on sustainable wildlife management and information on areas that may require complementary guidance. And that is due in January. I think that is also a good opportunity for us to be able to input on this. In terms of the challenges, I think there's quite, and even during the submission, because that linkage between gender and sustainable wildlife management in some areas still lack. So there's shortage of reporting on gender equality outcomes, and also lack of research on the interface between, wildlife, livelihoods, and gender. And so when we are advocating for this, if there's no backing from the research, I think that's a challenge. And that there's also either within government or other institutions, there's lack of institutional expertise on gender that leads to the gap between, the discourse and the implementation of any advocacy items that we put across. And last but not least is that research and conservation organization, they still remain this divide between social scientists that are advocating for inclusion and, natural biodiversity scientists. So sometimes I think they consider this view of inclusion of gender as confusing and distracting to the concept of wildlife conservation. So I feel like that is still a challenge. And so when we are discussing about sustainable wildlife management, when we bring in components of gender, it's really for people who are just thinking of the biodiversity and habitat loss, then they feel what is the need of talking about gender. So yeah, that's my submission. Over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I think that you managed to summarize a lot of work, and I just can highlight that there are many threads that we should follow, as you said, and I also linked to what Valentina mentioned on the capacity building, not only for us as women, organizations, or women coming from grassroots or from the local, but also capacity building for many other actors, such as the institutions, research centers, the parties, the secretariat, perhaps. Know that everyone we have to level up, all of us, to be able to have a conversation and move forward on what gender responsiveness mean. But because as you rightful highlight, like in terms of these topics that are more kind of ecologically seen. The social aspect of them, and more within that, the human rights aspect of that is less understood and less dialogued and even less implemented. So yes, we have a long way to go on that one, but thank you so much to you, Joyce, and all the colleagues members of that task force. We have a bit of work during this holiday for that submission and the ongoing activities. And well, having listened now from Valentina and Joyce that just gave us a glimpse of what happened during SOPSTA back in October in Nairobi, we're going to hear now from three colleagues that were able to participate both in person and online, thanks to the technology. Were able to follow the discussions within the working group on Article 8J. So for this segment on Article 8J reflections, we're going to hear first from Carolina Rodriguez and then from Yesenia Hernandez on their views regarding the new program of work or of Article 8J, and then we will close listening from Christina Egenter on her views on the item on traditional indicators, traditional knowledge indicators, and then we will go into the report back from the digital sequence information working group. So let us hear now from you, Caro, and thank you so much for being here despite all the challenges.
Hola, Ame, y hola a todos. Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Muchas gracias por esta invitación. Me disculpo por el ruido alrededor. Espero que me estén escuchando bien. Perfecto, gracias. Y bueno, también agradezco a las compañeras que pudieron estar en la 12ª sesión del grupo de trabajo del artículo 8J y de DSI, que yo hablaré en particular del grupo de trabajo del artículo 8J. Entonces les agradezco mucho por estar allá y por compartir los documentos, como también el hecho de poder acoger las propuestas que pudimos hacer. No puedo iniciar mi video. Es que estoy con el celular y es un poco difícil, gracias. Bueno, entonces, mirando también lo que nos han compartido las compañeros, creo que lo importante de demostrar estos avances es que todo esto va dirigido a lo que nos tenemos que preparar el próximo año, y es cómo vamos a lograr una negociación en la COP16, que será octubre-noviembre del próximo año. En esta COP vamos a ver la negociación del resultado final del marco de monitoreo, y en el caso que les voy a presentar, se terminará de negociar dos aspectos: la adopción del programa de trabajo del artículo 8J, el nuevo programa de trabajo, y segundo, qué arreglos institucionales se van a definir para una participación efectiva y plena de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Para ambos documentos, como para el marco de monitoreo, tenemos el gran reto de que allí quede estipulado la visibilización del rol de las mujeres, de las jóvenes y de las niñas en estos procesos de implementación, pero también de interpretación, que creo que todavía existe un gran reto en el proceso de interpretación antes de lograr la implementación. En este documento que salió de resultado ahora que fue la reunión en Ginebra, tenemos unos resultados de 7 puntos importantes generales. Uno, las partes van a tener que adoptar este nuevo programa de trabajo, que sería como el segundo programa de trabajo con unos nuevos puntos, al 2030. Es decir, 6 años para implementar aspectos fundamentales dentro de 8 elementos que fueron discutidos, y que son dentro de 8 elementos, cada uno con sus tareas. Otro elemento fundamental aquí es que vuelve y se reitera a todos los países. No sé si se va a lograr en 6 meses, pero es un reto, y creo que es importante desde cada una de nosotras generar esa incidencia a nivel nacional, y es que cada país debe designar su punto focal del artículo 8J. Esto es fundamental porque va a ser el puente o el punto de comunicación o el nodo de conexión para lograr la implementación de este programa de trabajo. Además, articulado con los arreglos institucionales que se definan, el punto focal es el que estará y hará efectivo este proceso de participación. Otro elemento fundamental como resultado es que se pide a las partes que este proceso no sea implementado a partir de intermediarios, sino que haya un trabajo directo con pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales como socios en terreno, en territorio, para lograr esta implementación, pero también de las acciones colectivas, y esto incluiría los procesos que se han adelantado como acción colectiva en el Caucus de mujeres o en los procesos colectivos de mujeres también en territorio. Por otro lado, otro de los elementos fundamentales es que en el reporte de la implementación se solicita que deben estar involucrados pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, no solamente en la preparación de este reporte, sino que, como comentaba antes, también deben estar involucrados en la revisión, en la actualización y no solo en la implementación de las estrategias y de los planes de biodiversidad nacionales. Y otro elemento es la incrementación de fondos. Aun cuando estos aspectos están de manera general y no traen a colación como un punto específico de que sea aplicado desde un enfoque de género, consideramos fundamental que ese elemento sea otra vez resaltado, trabajado en las siguientes sesiones para lograr que estos principios se incorpore este enfoque de género en dichos principios en el momento de adoptar el programa de trabajo. Igualmente en los arreglos institucionales. Bueno, eso es como el marco, como la sombrilla general que fundamenta el proceso del programa y del programa como de los arreglos institucionales. En cuanto al nuevo programa, se lograron algunos aspectos fundamentales desde el Caucus de Mujeres y con la gestión que se hicieron con gobiernos. Uno, por ejemplo, desde los principios básicos, que fueron 7, lograr que quedara visibilizado que la participación no se hable solamente de que sea inclusiva, equitativa o completa, sino que esté bien marcado el enfoque de género y que haya una particular participación tanto de mujeres, niñas, jóvenes. En este caso, pues se habla de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales, puesto que estamos hablando del artículo 8J. Por otro lado, otro de los principios es que dicha participación también se enfoque hay un enfoque holístico o se aplique este enfoque holístico teniendo en cuenta a las mujeres locales y a las mujeres indígenas en este proceso, puesto que son las que tienen las diversas relaciones con los diferentes agentes locales, familiares, sociales y en el marco de la biodiversidad. Uno de los principios que no quedó muy claro, aunque está allí y se señala el fortalecimiento del conocimiento tradicional, y es que este principio número 3 sí creemos que debe recalcarse un poco más, que quede visibilizado el conocimiento de las mujeres indígenas y locales o comunitarias, ya que quedó de manera general y esto es crucial porque dentro de los retos del DSI o el acceso a recursos genéticos, muchos de los saberes están específicamente en el rol de mujeres indígenas y locales. Otro de los principios fundamentales que quedaron aquí, el principio 6, es que esta implementación debe ser una implementación con un enfoque de género, pero en particular que haya una implementación del plan de acción de género. Quedó en el marco, en el principio 7. Bueno, dentro de los elementos, quedaron 8 elementos. Recuerden que cuando hicimos una presentación inicial sobre sobre la propuesta del nuevo programa de trabajo, solamente teníamos 6 elementos. En este caso se logró incluir los que el grupo de expertos había propuesto. Se los voy a recordar un poco cuáles son estos elementos. Uno, el de conservación y restauración. Ahí está incluido cómo se va a implementar la meta 3, pero también se articuló con la meta 2. Y esto está relacionado con el 30 por 30, o está también relacionado cómo vamos a comprender o interpretar el sendero, el tercer sendero o el pathway de territorios indígenas y tradicionales. Y creo que esto sería muy importante poderlo abordar desde el enfoque de género o desde el marco del Caucus de mujeres, y es aquí en esta meta 3, cómo se está abordando precisamente el trabajo de las mujeres, que allí es donde hay muchas de las defensoras, líderes mujeres que trabajan en los procesos de cuidar y proteger los ámbitos territoriales que son fundamentales para el caso familiar en cuanto a biodiversidad. Por otro lado, en el segundo punto de uso sostenible de la biodiversidad, se habló de la implementación del plan de acción sobre el uso sostenible consuetudinario. Pero creo que sería muy importante en este segundo punto que también lográramos que se incluyera el plan de acción de género. Puesto que hay uno de los elementos fundamentales, y también lo abordó Shruti en Sobsta, cuando hizo su presentación en el side event del manejo sostenible de la vida silvestre. Este elemento no solamente se articularía con el plan de acción del uso sostenible consuetudinario, sino también con el plan de género, con el plan de acción de género. Y eso también tendríamos que revisarlo para el punto 2.2 de este mismo elemento de uso sostenible, que habla sobre las iniciativas basadas en comunidad, donde incluye precisamente el manejo de la vida silvestre sostenible. Sería muy interesante retomar, y pues que Shruti, que hizo la presentación, pudiéramos tener este espacio para retomar su presentación, que fue súper útil y estratégica, y ver cómo se articulan precisamente estos dos elementos, estos dos planes. Para el caso de la participación de beneficios, pues fue fundamental que al fin se lograra dejar incorporado el apoyo a las iniciativas de los pueblos para desarrollar los protocolos comunitarios bioculturales, que aquí tenemos a Yesenia, que fuerza y liderazgo le ha dado a este punto, y que sería también muy interesante que pudiéramos tener un espacio con ella para que pudiéramos revisar también cómo desde allí podemos abordar o qué deberíamos aportar para la COP16 en este punto, en el momento de la adopción, si fuera necesario, o si pudiéramos complementarlo para el plan de acción de género. En cuanto al número 4, el elemento 4 es conocimiento y cultura. Bueno, perdón, listo, ok. Una de las discusiones, o de pronto para resumir, 3 discusiones importantes que también se recogieron aquí, fue el tema de lenguas, el tema de los idiomas, crucial, porque en principio solamente se había logrado que quedaran lenguas indígenas, y vimos y hemos visto también como en el desarrollo de muchos aspectos y en las experiencias que varias hemos tenido, que no solamente son el reconocimiento de las lenguas indígenas, sino que también existen otras lenguas que son lenguas étnicas, lenguas comunitarias, lenguas locales, que tienen un rol fundamental en la biodiversidad. Y en este momento pues se logró que se ampliara este componente de lenguas, tanto indígenas como locales, o pues como me comentaba también Ame, pues sería muy bueno y estratégico que pudiera quedar lenguas de pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Otro elemento fundamental fue el tema de los derechos ambientales y derechos humanos de los defensores y defensoras. En este caso hubo una gran discusión entre las partes, puesto que para ellos no es claro cómo este elemento puede quedar incluido en un ámbito de biodiversidad. Creo que aquí debemos también trabajar un poco más y entender que el rol que juegan las defensoras es un rol hacia la defensa y protección de la biodiversidad, cómo continuar trabajando sobre esos aspectos que se han tratado de defender y que van más allá de pensar solamente o reducirlo como lo han hecho muchos de los gobiernos a que es un aspecto social ajeno a este convenio de biodiversidad. Bueno, y por último, en arreglos institucionales, solamente comentarles que en este momento quedó entre corchetes la posibilidad de tener un cuerpo subsidiario del artículo 8, del artículo 8J. Esa va a ser también otra de las discusiones que entrarán a la COP16. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Caro, for all your efforts and the energy dedicated, regardless, despite being in a challenging situation personally. And I think that you raised a lot of critical points, and your intervention was so long because the discussions at AJ working group were like that, like were really long and a bit complicated, and at some moments really controversial. And but as Women's Caucus, as you shared, we managed to navigate a bit the situation, and we were able to push for the recognition and the respect of women's rights. But as with the other topics, the work is not over. It's just one step more in our on our path. So now let us hear directly from also Yesenia Hernandez, that was one of our members present there in Geneva. Welcome, Yesenia.
Thank you very much. Hello. Good morning, Padiush sisters. I will switch to Spanish. I'm sorry, I am in Montreal. Buenos días. Veo si puedo compartir solo 2 o 3 slides en pantalla. Me disculpo. ¿Puedo? ¿O no?
Sí, siempre y cuando se acorta la intervención, perfecto.
3 slides. Bueno, muchas gracias. Yo tuve la oportunidad, agradezco el apoyo de estar presencial en estas reuniones de Ginebra. Bueno, solo algunas palabras clave que creo que nos van a servir como guía para continuar, porque como dijo la hermana Carito, no estamos, esto no se ha finalizado y creo que vienen meses críticos, cruciales para sensibilizar, sobre todo a las partes que no han estado pues muy abiertas o muy conscientes en el tema de la importancia de pueblos indígenas, de comunidades locales. Desde los diálogos se hablaron de las disparidades y una palabra que también como Caucus de Mujeres tenemos que atender, buscar no ser invisibles en este ámbito del convenio y de sus decisiones, específicamente con nuestras hermanas, las mujeres de los pueblos indígenas y de las comunidades locales, porque hay disparidades, digamos que somos las últimas de las últimas, ¿no? Dentro de los grupos que sufren o que sufrimos estas disparidades, estos retos. Esta parte también de los temas transversales de mujeres, pueblos indígenas y jóvenes, y de seguir luchando, advocando por que se nos considere ostentores de derechos o right holders, como dicen en inglés. El tema de los defensores creo que es crítico hacerlo visible, aunque algunas partes lo quieran borrar, como ya vimos en las negociaciones, y ahí agradezco a Laura que ha estado bastante insistente desde el gobierno de Colombia y algunos otros gobiernos, pues luchando porque esto se incluya en los textos y se le dé la importancia que tiene, ¿no? Sobre todo para regiones como América Latina o el sureste de Asia, donde pues es muy complejo estar en esta situación. El tema, como ya dijo Carito, de lenguajes locales, yo recuerdo que India hizo una aseveración sobre eso y también es algo que les invito a que consideremos en esa advocacy, en esa defensa, porque pues hay muchas lenguas que no tienen el estatus de pueblos indígenas y además pues tenemos las sociedades dinámicas, ¿no? Bueno, ya les había dicho de las mujeres y pues los indicadores de género específicos. Bueno, aquí creo que hay cosas que Cristina va a ampliar, solamente ver el estatus de cómo quedaron las cosas. El tema de comunidades locales y pueblos indígenas, yo sí recomiendo que seamos muy cuidadosas en no meternos en esta parte porque es una discusión bastante compleja y que creemos que, bueno, en mi particular punto de vista, perdón, en mi particular punto de vista creemos que eso también alentó muchas discusiones y redujo esa posibilidad de éxito que se tiene con el asunto del órgano subsidiario, ¿no? Hubo una parte de África que cuando se estaba hablando del tema dijo, bueno, entonces quieren dos órganos subsidiarios y se van a separar. Muchas partes también pidieron que se trabaje juntos, IPLCs. En resumen, como Caucus de mujeres, ser muy cautelosas en este tema y tratar de no involucrarnos más de lo correspondiente. Y bueno, el documento afortunadamente está braqueteado, no fue una adopción porque pues es algo más complejo. Bueno, en los componentes de manejo de manejo de conocimiento tenemos una recomendación final adoptada y bueno, los otros programas, Cristina va a hablar de eso y bueno, del nuevo programa, muchas gracias Colombia, como ya Carito habló de todas las menciones que tenemos en género y en mujeres, pero esto de la protección de todas las formas de violencia, tenemos algunos brackets en ese programa de trabajo. Hay bastante, bueno, no hay bastantes, hay menciones en espacios críticos. No voy a repetir lo que dijo Carito, pero también otra de las cosas que tanto a nivel local como en las bocas a nivel internacional tenemos que hacer es cómo conciliar los derechos colectivos con los derechos individuales, no contra, con, porque hubo algunos comentarios de gente del FIB que nos decían, bueno, es que nosotros pensamos en colectivo, y yo lo sé, pero dentro de esa colectividad, adentro hay, bueno, en la colectividad hay diversidad, entonces, cómo los distintos grupos tienen diferentes tratamientos o necesidades específicas. Y les decía, esto de los lenguajes locales es algo que el Caucus de Mujeres debe sentirse muy orgulloso porque se defendió, se propuso también esto de Indigenous and Local Women. Entonces, estamos haciendo cosas innovadoras, cosas que están abriendo brechas para aquellos grupos y hermanas que han estado invisibilizados o han pretendido, ¿no? Y bueno, les decía, vamos a ser muy cuidadosos con el tema de IPLCs para evitar tener o meternos en esas controversias y también promover más diálogos entre los tres caucus de los ostentores de derechos o right holders. Y creo que, pues bueno, vamos a tomar unas vacaciones ahorita, pero que sí tenemos que trabajar muy fuerte a partir de enero, febrero, porque sabemos que en mayo tenemos OBSTA, tenemos SBI, que tenemos COP a finales del próximo año, y que pues hay que organizarnos para hacer la incidencia que corresponde en estas materias. Creo que vamos bien. Tal vez incluso en 10 hay cosas que nos hubiera gustado hacer mucho más, pero por lo menos digamos que la puerta se nos está abriendo en más de la mitad y también trabajar para que todos estos logros se den a conocer con las demás redes, con los demás grupos de mujeres al interior de nuestros países, con nuestros gobiernos locales, para sensibilizar, porque lamentablemente tanto en materia de pueblos indígenas, en algunos casos, pero mucho más en materia de género, pues a veces vemos como que algunas partes dicen, bueno, ¿y como para qué es importante, no? Bueno, somos nada más y nada menos que mitad más un poquito de la población. Steve Shibu, gracias. ¿Algún comentario? Estoy a sus órdenes. Según mi cronómetro, ya son mis 6 minutos.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias, Jess. I think that you also nailed many crucial points, and also in a great complementarity with what Caro analyzed from AJ. And I will highlight only two main words that you mentioned. One is the conciliation and also the dialogue. I think that is a work that has to be continually, that has to be maintained, sustained, and even nurtured. And thank you so much for the role you have played all these years in actually connecting different caucuses, and hopefully that will will even improve in the upcoming months. Now let us jump into our next panelist to listen to her reflections. This is Christina Egenter from WWF, member of the Women's Caucus, that was supporting and participating effectively in the negotiations in Geneva at the beginning of this month. Welcome, Christina, and please share with us your views on what happened during these discussions.
Thank you, Amelia, and nice to see you all. And some of you I recently worked hard together in Geneva, and that was a pleasure. I would also like to commend the work done in general by the Women Caucus has been amazing. I had the opportunity to learn a lot and also try to influence other organizations on with this thinking. That's for me the most important thing. And both at SABSTA and AJ negotiation. And I also have to commend the work on this particular topic, the work that was done by the task force leader on traditional knowledge indicators. That was Shruti. So thank you. A big applause to you as well. I'll be short and concise because I think the most important points, especially around indicators, were mentioned by Valentina during SABSTA, and so those apply also for the discussion and the draft decision during AJ, which was mostly in the paper. Joint program of work on the links between biological and cultural diversity, review and update of the 4 adopted traditional knowledge indicators. And this has been successful. It went through, it's an L paper, so that it's a good indicator for adoption at COP16. But I won't go too much into the knowledge indicators, traditional knowledge indicators. So we know, for example, very well that one, especially headline indicator 9.2 on the percentage of the population in traditional occupation is already a headline indicator. But overall, the recommendations and points raised in this draft decision are important because they will definitely contribute to the overall discussion on the monitoring framework and is great input into the work of the ATEG. And ATEG co-chair, I believe, was there and presented on the work and next meetings of the ad hoc expert group. So this is very important. And also we need to be proud as Women Caucus to have made some important knowledge text addition to the draft decision around data disaggregation by sex. It was by gender, but there was parties' input, so it's now disaggregation by sex for all indicators related to the framework, including for traditional knowledge indicators. And this is absolutely very critical. ATEG has not yet discussed on disaggregated data, but this is fundamental input. It might be one of the ways to really anchor gender mainstreaming into the implementation of the GBF. So together with keeping an eye and advocacy push on the headline indicators for all targets, including Target 23, and that was amazing work done at SABSTA on this by the Women Caucus, and we need to continue to do. But disaggregation data for all relevant targets, if not all, is very critical. So that was a big achievement and a big applause to the Women Caucus team working hard in Geneva. There was another point which was mentioned throughout by all others around how the Women Caucus brought up this discussion around participation. Of course, full and effective implementation has been the standard language, but in Target 22, it was agreed in the new GBF that that participation is also 5 qualifiers. I remember that more than each one of them: equitable, inclusive, full, effective, and gender responsive. So that's, again, another way in which we can anchor gender mainstreaming and put it that at the core and focus of the implementation of the GBF. So that language also made it in the text of this particular paper on the traditional knowledge indicators draft decision, but also in the bracketed draft decision of the program of work. So it's good advances to be noted. Then I also have a couple of things to reflect, and that was coming mostly from the side events. I don't know if we're going to have any specific discussion, but the side events, 3 side events organized by the Women Caucus were very sharp, very good, very interesting, and also with quality participation. And I say that because it's important. We don't always need to expect huge numbers, but the quality participation, who is there, parties who are there, eminent people are there, is very important to link into the discussion. So one side event was around monitoring with the gender lens. And I think that was quite successive in raising a few issues. One of which is how important is to keep an eye on the issue, on the theme of land rights and tenure. This is critical for women empowerment, for women's rights. It's critically embedded in the GPA, in Target 23. So it's important. There is no indicators on that, but among the package of traditional knowledge indicators, one would be to continue to develop work on indicators for land rights and tenure. And we know the data are available, and the methodology is also available by a good presentation from the International Land Coalition. The other important aspect that we need to keep an eye on is around documentation, and how important is that a diverse source of data and information is always considered and makes its way into decision making. We know that the diversity of knowledge sources and multiple evidence are key to more effective decision making on biodiversity. And this is also a way to push that sometimes traditional knowledge, specialized traditional knowledge of women, is critically important to effective and sustainable management of many natural resources, including land. So this is all great and important. And as was mentioned by Laura at the beginning, there is a treasure, at least the translation was into English was treasure. There is a treasure of information, data, case studies, documentation that is held by the women and the Women Caucus in the network and organization in which we participate. And this is critical, again, for decision making. So let's continue that documentation, let's continue to break down that invisibility of women practices and contribution to biodiversity, and submit that information, share that with information with decision maker. This is something we need to continue to do at national level, wherever we have access, and we can make an inroad with the government and decision makers at national and subnational level. I will keep it at that for the time being, and thank you again for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing your reflections, for being always a great advisor, a great a collaborative member, and also for highlighting all of this work done through the side events. And we can share the recordings with everyone in case you're interested to look into them. And also, as Christina mentioned, there were critical gains during these negotiations, the inclusion of the language of Target 22, because it took literally years to be negotiated, and now it's also up to us to not let that be forgotten and actually embedded in the upcoming discussions and decisions in the following work of the CBD. Sadly, this point on the diverse sources proposed and advocated by us couldn't make it through the knowledge management document, but fortunately there are going to be other opportunities to make that point, because that is, as Christina mentioned, critical for women, particularly from indigenous peoples and local communities, because if this diverse sources element is not fully recognized, that means that only Western science sources are going to be used to document, to monitor, but not the knowledge held by women on the ground. So as you have seen, all of these items are interconnected in the diverse items in the different meetings. So it has been a real pleasure to see all of you participating, and I have learned also a lot. But before sharing my perspectives, I'm so sorry for that. Let us hear also the reflections from the digital coming from the Digital Sequence Information Working Group. That was the first one, and we will hear from our expert, our advisor to the Caucus, and great inspiration, Cecilia Gitaiga from Kenya, and that will guide us to understand better what happened during that working group and what is going to come next. Thank you, Cecilia, for accepting this invitation, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Amelia, and also thank you very much for everyone who has made the presentations and also gave our positions to the various meetings and advocated for our rights. I'm happy to be part of this group because there's actually outcomes that we can be proud of, and we are. I wonder whether you can hear me well, and if you can see me well. My camera is not very tidy right now.
We can see and hear you, yes.
Okay, then that's okay. Anyway, so I had this PowerPoint, which I prefer not to share because sometimes the notes can be a lot more, and if I try to summarize, I will maybe it will be too much to read and listen at the same time. So allow me kindly to just summarize within the minutes Amelia has given us. For me and my colleague Yesenia, we participated in the DSI working group. And in that group, you will find that there was a decision 15.9 that we were supposed to discuss. So in this decision, there was, okay, first of all, the questions I'm supposed to answer is the main discussions, the advocacy priorities for us, and the challenges and opportunities we got, yeah? So you will find that this decision 15.9 gave the mandate to the working group, established the working group, and gave the mandate to discuss issues of governance of the fund, governance of DSI, disbursement of a fund, and the non-monetary benefit sharing. And then there were other issues like relation to other systems. And now under these heads, the way the decision was arranged, there was first of all the issue of contributions to the fund, and then the disbursement of the funds and non-monetary benefit sharing. and then there was governance and relation to other systems. This decision came from far. The conversation started in 2016 and then 2018. Now, when issues of DSI were still new, and DSI somehow was also a discussion in the ARTEG of 2020, where options for operational terms and identification of key areas for capacity building were identified. And then there was the COP15 decision, which we took part in. Now, this decision established the working group, and this is the basis upon which the group was working. And DSI, as a term in itself, was not agreed in terms of its definition, but it was agreed to be used as a working definition for the meeting. But from the COP, there's still no agreement on what DSI is. So according to that decision, the benefit sharing should also support conservation. So benefit sharing, fair and equitable benefit sharing, is also an outcome of DSI, and it should also support conservation and sustainable use, under the CBD. And of course, our indigenous peoples and local communities, among which you will find our indigenous women and local communities there. So there was also supposed to be a multilateral approach in the sharing of benefits arising from the use of DSI. So before we head to the COP16, there were some principles which we were supposed to work with, principles in paragraph 9 of that decision and 10. And also there was also another interesting one, 11 and 12. But for now, principles 9 required that the solution for the fair and equitable benefit sharing on DSI, on genetic resources, should be efficient, feasible, practical. It should generate more benefits, both monetary and non-monetary. It should be effective. It should have legal certainty and not hinder research, and be consistent with open access to data. Open access to data was one of the contentious issues, and it should be consistent with international obligations and mutually supportive access and benefit sharing instruments. And IPLC rights should be taken into consideration, including with respect to traditional knowledge associated with genetic resources that they hold. Now, up to that point, when they say IPLC rights should be taken into consideration, the implication is it's not only about IPLCs, it includes other stakeholders, because the word including is used. So that is okay for us. Now, this decision was supposed to be implemented in a way that it will achieve Target 13 and Goal C. Goal C requires the monetary and non-monetary benefits from utilization of DSI and traditional knowledge associated with the genetic resources to be shared equitably and fairly with IPLCs, and increased. This is Goal C from the GBF, increased by 2050, while ensuring that TK is protected and contribute to conservation, as according to the CBD. Now, Target 13 requires that we take effective legal policy, administrative, and capacity building measures at all levels to ensure fair and equitable sharing of benefits. So the issue of fair and equitable sharing of benefits is quite prominent in this conversation on DSI. Then GBF has the 23 targets, according to which the actions set out under each target were supposed to be initiated immediately by the last COP and completed by 2030. 2030 is just 7 years down the line. So for us, it means that we actually need to be reporting our achievements up to 2030, because otherwise there is no more time. And this 2030 timeline is also consistent with the gender plan of action. So in terms of recommendations for ourselves, we should already engage in monitoring and evaluation of how gender matters and women have been included and have participated in different capacities and levels of governance. And it's important to also mention that the gender plan of action requires that women requires that we have gender disaggregated data so that we can be able to at least be able to monitor. Whether this monitoring has to do with the disbursement of the fund that I've just mentioned, or the monetary and non-monetary benefits, or the governance, the gender plan of action comes to our aid. And it's very important for us to follow through on the discussions on gender disaggregated data. So we did pitch in, and on the contributions to the fund, then the parties were pretty divided over what criteria should be applied and how these contributions should be weighed based on different parties' contribution. So for this particular issue, we maybe just discussed amongst ourselves and said we will allow them to continue, because if some of these conversations split the parties and some of them are our allies, and because we don't contribute to the fund, here we watched and listened, but among the issues that were key for consideration were, for example, triggers for contribution and who should contribute, the criteria for contribution. And also, if you look at the decision, there were issues that were left for consideration, future consideration, because there are those things which were agreed, the way the decision was formatted. There are those things which were agreed, and then there are those things which were pended. And I think this is now going to be the mandate of the COP. So one of the other issues, okay, besides the criteria, who should contribute at the triggers, one of the issues was whether the contribution should include 1% of the retail price of all commercial income, net revenue from products resulting from all utilization of DSI on genetic resources, or the profits or revenue generated from the use of DSI. So those were some of the conversations under this head that were still pending. It would be good if you, after this meeting, just look at the decision. It's dated 18th November 2023, and it's actually very easy to follow because of the way it was arranged. So under the head of disbursement of funds, now here we had to really ask that we be included. For this reason, when the funds are being discussed and disbursed, of course, we have to be at the table, yes? Based on our contribution, like you've heard from the other presenters, and also because women have specialized knowledge. But somehow, what was disappointing for all of us as a caucus is the fact that when we saw the decision the first time, it was shocking to see there was no reference to women at all. The document was completely blind. So we were watching these items with the idea at the back of our head that there is nothing mentioning us and that we have to try and make sure that women are included. So under the head of disbursement of fund, we managed to include through one of the parties that the fund should be gender responsive. So that is good, because then we can be able to put in there women and gender disaggregated data. And then in the disbursement of funds, there was also the issue of self-identified needs. Now, not only of IPLCs, we also managed to request that women be included. So there was always this request that we include women and youth. And in this meeting, we noticed that the youth were not there. So we also tried to make sure that whenever we speak about women, we also mentioned the youth, because they are part of our intersectional society. So when you go to the non-monetary benefits, this was contentious. The monetary benefits are now a bit clearer because then you can be able to do the math, and you can be able to follow, you can be able to calculate. But for the non-monetary benefits, there was the issue of how we even decide how we share these non-monetary benefits and what they are. So there was also reference to what is contained in other instruments. And for us, we say that the Nagoya Protocol also has other, in addition to the monetary, There's also the non-monetary benefits which are outlined there, and they include the needs of the local communities and other considerations within communities. You know, based on what has been discussed under PIC and MAT previously under the Nagoya Protocol. So here it was a bit of a push and pull between parties. But what happened eventually is that we managed to request that the criteria for sharing of benefits should include those self-identified needs of IPLCs, women and youth. So at least we managed to get some recognition there. And then we were also supposed to be targets for capacity building. So that's also important for us because even IPLCs and women, all of us feel the gap of capacity. They need to be increased, they need to be developed. And because this has been a running gap throughout engagement with these scientific processes, I think this would be one of the areas where we need to also plan for ourselves how we build our own capacities or engage more with other more knowledgeable people in this area so that we also build our capacities in tandem with the developments in the international scene. Anyway, so that was also some progress. And then in the governance area, we really pushed to not be considered as stakeholders because we were clustered together when they were considering who should be part of the governance mechanism. There was IPLC, civil society, no, IPLC separate. There was IPLC separate and other groups. Sorry, I don't have the decision immediately right now. But I'll tell you, what happened is that women were clustered together. Yes, there was private sector separate, IPLC separate, and then civil society, youth, women were put in one basket, and then academia separate. You understand? Non-parties, yeah, in such a format. So we said we do not want to be considered as stakeholders, rather we want to be considered separately as rights holders. And that is why we were saying, because of our advocacy for being considered as rights holders, we have a seat at the convention, which is great. So we want that recognition to continue throughout. And then when it came to so that was also a success. I'll go back to the governance issue after I finish this last point. The relation to other systems.
Cecilia. I'm so sorry. We need to come to an end. If you can provide your conclusions. Sorry.
2 points, yeah. So the relation to other systems, there was consideration that we have WHO, which is also working on DSI, and that we also have UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources. The one that was contentious was UNESCO, but it was one of the issues for further consideration in future meetings. So the loss that we suffered was the failure to include us specifically as women on the governance mechanism for the advisory committee that was formed. So what they did is say that it would be gender responsive, but they didn't specifically mention that we will have women there as part of the advisory committee. So I think for me, we do have some homework to follow up with what will happen next time. And we also have to make sure that we try to build our own capacities. And yeah, we have to also make sure that some of the discussions which were very contentious, like tracking and whether or not to include the Nagoya Protocol, we can provide technical expertise, but maybe not necessarily take sides along with the parties because we might lose some of our allies. Otherwise, that is the short summary of my very long presentation. Thank you very much. Such a pleasure to present before all of you and also to engage with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cecilia. And I know that is a challenge for all of you to summarize because it is a lot that what happened, all the background, so we are all able to understand better what is on at stake. So thank you so much for making this effort, and for sure there's gonna be more coming out from these conversations. And as a Women Caucus, we also want to share with all the members and all of our allies. So we will prepare some more materials based on these reflections that you have shared, because time is never enough. I just want to thank all of you distinguished panelists and also our audience for actively participate. I will beg your indulgence for stay with us 3 more minutes to close this session by hearing from Ms. Marina Leticia Lopez Sincal. She is the Gender and Biodiversity Focal Point for Guatemala, and she has joined us all the way during the session. And please let us hear her closing remarks, and then we will be able to say goodbye for this session. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Marina Leticia, and the floor is yours.
Bueno, muchas gracias Bueno, yo soy Marina Leticia López Incal, mujer maya cachiquel de Guatemala, y actualmente trabajo para el Consejo Nacional de Áreas Protegidas, específicamente para impulsar el tema de género. Y me he interesado en conocer, ¿verdad?, el trabajo que realizan las mujeres o el grupo Caucus de mujeres. Lo anotaba en el chat, ¿verdad?, para conocer un poco más cuáles son las líneas que trabajan, ¿verdad?, para ver ese vínculo, ¿verdad?, que tenemos, porque obviamente ahora hay un plan de acción de género con objetivos claros y precisos, y cómo entonces los países partes, ¿verdad?, y como puntos focales de género, cómo podemos fortalecer ese trabajo, cómo podemos dar otros pasos significativos en beneficio, ¿verdad?, de esa transversalidad del enfoque de género, que básicamente lo que busca son romper esos estereotipos sociales, ¿verdad?, y paradigmas de trabajo, y que también las mujeres demuestren que hay liderazgo positivo y que también hay habilidades, hay capacidades, hay conocimientos específicos que han contribuido desde hace mucho tiempo, ¿verdad?, en la conservación de los recursos de la diversidad biológica. Y qué interesante, ¿verdad?, porque yo sé que son 3 objetivos del CDB y probablemente hemos trabajado un poco más sobre la conservación y el uso sostenible, pero ¿cómo vamos a entender y a impulsar, por ejemplo, el objetivo de la distribución justa y equitativa de los beneficios? ¿Y qué vamos a entender por los beneficios monetarios y no monetarios? Porque yo creo que ese es un reto que tenemos, ¿verdad?, desde clarificar, ¿verdad?, cómo vamos a impulsar estos temas, porque en las comunidades, en los pueblos indígenas, se asocia únicamente cuando se habla de beneficio en monetario. Pero yo sé que hay situaciones que no precisamente se trata de moneda, sino que otros beneficios ecosistémicos, sociales, culturales, por ejemplo. Entonces me da mucho gusto haberme sumado con ustedes. Espero seguir en comunicación, ¿verdad? Y desde luego cuenten también con mi apoyo en lo que podamos, ¿verdad?, desde la visión de las mujeres indígenas guatemaltecas, aportar al logro de los objetivos del Caucus de Mujeres. Muchísimas gracias. Únicamente un placer saludarles.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much, Ms. Marina Leticia Lopez, for being here with us. And thank you so much, all of you. We look forward to our continued collaboration in advancing gender justice with the CBD framework. Time is never enough, but our collaboration will keep going. Well, this is the end of this webinar, Stocktake of the Women's Caucus work towards the CBD Intersessional meetings. Thank you everyone for being here. And there's a lot more to be done in the next months towards COP and beyond that. Have a good day, everyone, and see you all around. Please stay safe, and thank you for everything.
Adiós, hasta luego, hasta luego.
Chao.
Muy bien.